Fallible commands make their entry this week, which make it much easier to define different levels of behavior when a command returns a result. And POLDERS, which we've seen in multiple showcases, got a Steam page this week. POLDERS is a quintessentially Dutch city builder, where the sea level rises, your dikes break, and you'll have to fight for every piece of land against the relentless sea. Gamepad menu navigation also gets a boost this week with a new directional navigational example. And let's kick it off with Fallible Commands. 17.043 and 17.215 combine to implement result handling for commands using queue-handle. In this case, commands are effectively wrapped with error handlers when they execute. So this does not mean you can handle a command error in the same system that you queue it in. The error handling happens later, similar to the commands themselves. Here's an example on screen of using the currently named commands queue-handled, which accepts a command as the first argument, and in this case uses a bevy-provided error handler to print a warning if the command returns an error. Bevy supplies error handlers for panicking as well as printing errors or warns or being silent. There's also a new result type alias that can be used in these type signatures. Meanwhile, 17.096 introduces a scale factor to 2D and 3D bloom, which enables a closer match to anamorphic blurs. In 16.947, mesh opt was replaced in favor of METIS, that's METIS, to group triangles for virtual geometry. This change enables minimizing locked vertices, improving simplification. There are before and after shots in the PR, but unless you've been following virtual geometry as it's developed, it may be hard to figure out what exactly the difference is here. And moving on to directional UI navigation, 17.102 hooks into the new input focus to power an initial implementation of directional gamepad controls for UI and non-UI. Additionally, 17.224 adds a new example that shows off gamepad and directional navigation. You can run this in the repo with cargo run example directional navigation. And bevy picking is getting ever more polished, with the debug picking plugin from bevy-mod-picking getting upstreamed. You can now run the debug picking example with the Bevy DevTools feature enabled, which will show you the debug output you might be expecting from having used bevy-mod-picking in the past. And of course, Alice's merge train is a maintainer level view into active PRs, both those that are merging and those that need work. If you're unfamiliar, this is a thread over on Mastodon where Alice goes through each of the PRs, and she gives a brief overview, which is nice for those that are a little bit more complicated and need some domain experience, while also talking about whether they are merged or need more work. Our first showcase is a Vampire Survivors-like prototype built with Web GPU as a target in mind. This is playable on itch.io and includes points, pickups, and upgrades. This is the start of a Lemmings-style game with image-based collision and destructible terrain. The source code for this one is available on GitHub. And then we've got some improvements to the To Build a Home UI. There's a great discussion around picking and when to use global or local observers and marker components that lives in this Discord thread, so definitely go check that out if you're looking for better patterns around observers. The TLDR, for those that don't want to click through, is that combining queries, .get, and global observers can be a nice pattern. And then we've got a coin pusher arcade simulation built with Avian and Blender. This again is using Avian 3D and can be found on GitHub. And Crystal Realms is a 2D sandbox MMO game, and this week it got a trailer over on YouTube. The game itself is available on itch.io, including devlog updates. A new spawn macro was added to the Mevi crate. If you're looking for alternative ways of spawning entities and their components, this might interest you. The next screen is a little bit brighter than this one, but is very worth viewing. This is a splash screen showing a made with Bevy over a POLDERS background. It does end up saying Steam page incoming, but the Steam page is already out. And that splash screen, of course, was for POLDERS, which got its Steam page this week. This is a project that grew in the showcase channel in the Bevy Discord, from cell shading to irregular grids to the distinctive POLDERS sphere. POLDERS has also been the subject of a talk on YouTube. POLDERS has a Steam page now where you can go wishlist it. This is the author's first Bevy project with a top-down survivor perspective. For me, it's reminiscent of the old ActionScript Flash games that used to be just absolutely everywhere. Next up, we've got an in-progress improvements to the frustum culling for this game. This closer bounding boxes, red, green, cyan, and purple, belong to the shadow cascades, and the yellow boxes are visible to the camera itself. Using observers and the new GLTF material name component together to make a character appearance builder system. The next demo is going to get a little bit brighter, and that of course is the End is Bean. The End is Bean is a survival RTS made for a local monthly game jam. It uses Bevy or Rapier 2D and Bevy tweening. I easily lost tens of minutes to this while I was recording the video. And here we've got an in-progress crate called bevy-butler. This is a set of procedural macros intended to cut down on plugin and system boilerplate code while improving the self-documentation of systems. The crate is currently in a first draft phase and is actively soliciting feedback. Next up, we've got a portal demo where shooting portals through portals is supported using picking, and teleporting through the portal is possible for dynamic objects with velocities. This demo uses Bevy Easy Portals, which is probably the flagship crate, Bevy FPS Controller, Avian, and Avian Pickup. And then we've got some output from a Karaoke tool for lyric rendering and additional graphics. A demo of the output that we are seeing right here, right now, is available over on YouTube. And in Jarl, crafting, grids, sounds, and items come together to power a very polished drag-and-drop interface for containers, such as chests, in Jarl. And pixelation and outlines are always fun shader projects. This is a post-processing effect to pixelate 3D scenes. It includes an outline shader based on depth, normals, and a Roberts cross that is a north-south, east-west comparison sampling, as well as half-finished implementations of dithering and quantization. This in-progress crate is called Bevy Pixelated 3D. And then we've got an open source rock, paper, scissors battle simulation. This is kind of more of an automata example where rocks, papers, and scissors move around in the space and, simulate fighting. And here we have a demo of an in-progress ASCII renderer. And finally, we've got a new 2D starter template for Bevy applications that brings an interactive cargo generate-based setup process. The process for this one includes settings for nightly rust, parallel compilation, and crane lift. This is the simple Bevy template. And with that, we're done with the showcases and into the crate releases. First off, we've got another edge detection post-processing effect in Bevy Edge Detection. This is a post-processing based edge detection implemented with a Sobel filter over depth, normal, and color. The post-processing step is heavily influenced by the post-processing example in the Bevy repo, so if you're interested in the implementation, definitely understand that and then comes to see this. And then there's RPack with Bevy RPack, which is a command line and a GUI interface for generating sprite sheets. If you find your way to the repo, you can also find your way to a deployed version of this and experiment with it in your browser. And then we've got Bevy Tailwind. Bevy Tailwind is an attempt at using Tailwind CSS utility classes in Bevy. And we saw it in action earlier, but we've got Bevy Easy Portals 0.4. Bevy Easy Portals is an easy-to-use visual portal crate that lets you create mirrors and other cool effects. 0.4 brings support for picking, a depth stencil, and more. And Bevy eGUI is a fairly heavily used piece of infrastructure, Bevy eGUI being an eGUI integration with Bevy. 0.32 brings Bevy picking support as well as input handling refactor, which is an initial step towards diegetic, that is, world-space UI. And Bevy Cursor Kit allows you to use .cur and .ani cursor files in Bevy. It's worth noting that the author of this crate has also added texture atlas support for custom cursors to Bevy, so go give the PR review if you want animated cursors in Bevy 0.16. That PR number is 17121. And then we've got Bevy Cobweb UI 0.8. Bevy Cobweb UI is an asset-oriented UI framework for Bevy, and 0.8 brings grid layout support. And then a crate we've seen before, Bevy Debug Log 0.5. Bevy Debug Log allows you to access tracing logs in your Bevy app using vanilla Bevy UI. It looks a bit like this. 0.5 brings support for the recent scroll position component in Bevy 0.15, enabling the scrolling of the logs that you can see inside your app. Bevy Rich Text 3D got its first release. Bevy Rich Text 3D is a mesh-based raster rich text implementation for Bevy. This can render to a mesh and an image, one quad per glyph, has a simple rich text implementation that can fetch data from the world, shader-based text animation, and outlines. And boimp, which I've tried to do justice, is an octahedral imposters implementation for Bevy, and also the sound a mesh is supposed to make when its LODs pop. Octahedral imposters take higher resolution meshes and bake multiple views of them to textures, which can be rendered on significantly lower poly geometry while retaining the appearance. As such, you'll notice settings for how the snapshots are arranged when you're baking the textures, and some instructions for what kind of meshes to use. Next up, we've got Degen Toon Clouds, which is a shader for generating animated 2D clouds using noise. And finally, for the crate releases, we've got Bevy Eulerian Fluid, a 2D fluid simulation plugin that performs simulation on the GPU. And we've got two educational posts this week. First off, what's better than one set of UVs? Two. This is an introduction to using Bevy's support for two UV maps on the same geometry and what that could be useful for. If you're watching this video, this UV's video is on the same channel. And then we've got bevy-santa-demo, a Christmas-themed Bevy workshop that results in a game where you help Santa collecting presents while trying to avoid snowflakes. And that's it for this week. As always, we have all of the merged pull requests as well as the opened issues and PRs if you want to get more involved. That's it for this week. I hope you have a great rest of yours, and I'll see you in the next one.